So one of the most important things about Sephiroth is, in my opinion, letting natural scenarios of Smash play themselves out. And what I mean by that is something like getting off the ledge or escaping the corner is very universal. Like, this is going to happen in every matchup, every stage. It's going to happen multiple times. So one of the difficult things about Sephiroth is that his ledge trapping is actually probably some of the weakest in Ultimate in terms of like actually punishing the get-ups people are doing. Like this brief moment when you're vulnerable during a neutral get-up, Sephiroth's probably one of the worst characters at actually hitting that.
Okay.
But what he is good at is corner pressure because of his threat range. Like if I'm right under this platform, like my opponent's going to be like locked in the shield when they're cornered. It's going to be hard for them to get out. So if I'm so focused on the ledge trap, like if I do like 2 F tilts while my opponent's on the ledge and they just jump and go to this platform, now not only have I not successfully ledge trapped, I didn't get to see the corner scenario either.
Right. I find myself in that scenario sometimes too when I'm committed to the second F tilt and while they're already able to act like they're actionable above me.
Exactly. So I think it's really important to stand your ground and have confidence in that scenario, because regardless of like you're not getting anything in the moment and things might feel slow or it might feel like you're doing something wrong, if you give your opponent enough visual cues, they will simply just have to pick the option that beats it.
Okay.
In a scenario where they shouldn't have that privilege, where they should have to work to get out of disadvantage.
Oh, so you're almost like, if I'm understanding correctly, you kind of want to not play your hand. So like if I do this, they know to jump kind of thing, right? Like you don't want to just put a hitbox.
Exactly. So you want to be able to threaten the ledge trap in a way where you're not throwing away your frame advantage. Essentially, what I'm always trying to teach is that since these scenarios are universal and they will repeat themselves, you want to collect as much information as you can from your opponent. You know, what do they like to do off the ledge? When do they like to do it? If I give them certain visual cues, do they respond to them?
Okay, so
etc.
Visual cue, I'm assuming is how do they treat this? How do they treat
anything you can do that can
prompts like a response of some sort, I guess.
Priority of your corner pressure while still being a threat.
Okay.
So like that first F tilt is fine, but that second F tilt is like essentially, if it works, great. If it doesn't, the situation is over. And you never want to do something like that when you're in advantage.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like you're playing with the perspective as if you're in a losing situation when you're not. But so, and once again, the corner pressure is so important. So if I let these phases play out, I get to watch how they get off the ledge, I get to watch how they escape the corner, and that information is so good because Sephiroth just can't see a situation like that and win. He needs to see a pattern. Maybe there's a habit you notice.
So this is something that you've mentioned, and I've taken some sessions with Isaiah and a couple other people now, just trying to get all the information so when I actually am able to sit down and play, I have a direction. But a lot of it is pattern recognition. These scenarios play out over and over. So like I've gathered it's like, how do people land? How do people get onto stage? Usually in the corner, people are more likely to jump. But like, where do you start? I guess like out of shield, they always jump out of shield or something. Like I don't know where to start the pattern recognition or how to prompt things. Sorry for hitting you there.
No, you're okay.
But like, our character can't really go first, like short of the odd nair or like, oh, you dash attack on my shield, haha. Like there's not a lot that we have, right? So it's how do you get so much results against someone like a Grid Ninja or a Roy that's just constantly breathing down your neck, or even a Mystery Game & Watch that's just cancer?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think Sephiroth is probably looking for a couple different priorities.
Okay.
If we keep it with the ledge scenario, the way they get up off the ledge is really important for me. Because even without Sephiroth, my entire playstyle in Smash is connecting people's behavior into how they, how they're feeling like in and out of the game and all that stuff. I'm collecting information in all these scenarios and trying to connect it into how they might behave in a certain different situation, blah, blah, blah. Like that's my entire playstyle, regardless of Sephiroth. But I just think it's extra important with Sephiroth because there's no real way to win without it. So if we go to the ledge, like if my opponent like takes a lot of time, they get up slowly, they sit in the shield, they're not rushing out of the corner. I connect that behavior into confidence, and they're not really afraid of anything at the moment. So my goal is to try to change that, and I'm going to make sure I stand my ground in that scenario because I'm purely collecting information. I'm not going to run in and approach the corner and give them something to quote unquote beat, because now that great scenario that I had, I don't get to watch them play it out at all. But if my opponent like grabs the ledge, they immediately get up, or they do like a neutral get up into a roll, it's like, okay, those were 2 defensive options in a row. That's a sign of they're in a place they don't want to be, they're rushing it, they're afraid of something, and I can take advantage of that, right? Like if my opponent grabs the ledge and I know they're very quick to get up, I'm going to throw out something like this, where in reality I probably would have thrown out something like this without that information.
I see. So you kind of like, you can test the waters with some moves and then go with the commitment once you kind of have a feel for how they're playing or how they're feeling.
Exactly. You're giving yourself a bit of insurance with their behavior, and also maybe with some other scenarios. Like if I'm playing against a character that's a little floatier and I go for this down smash, so I have the heavy shield damage, I have the platform covering me, I'm going for it preemptively because I'm assuming they're going to get off the ledge quick, and if they don't, I'm still prioritizing the corner pressure and ledge trap scenario. Whereas comparing it to a scenario where they're on the ledge already and I go for this down smash, now I'm letting them get up, I'm letting them potentially even escape the corner, or if a character's fast enough, they might even hit me. So the priorities definitely have to be in order. It's great, right? Like I get a combo, like cool, I get some damage. But I'm not truly in like a pure advantage state yet, because a lot of characters are going to try to air dodge through Sephiroth or kind of brute force their disadvantage because his moves have a lot of startup. So a lot of players, I think when they get that advantage state going, they start ripping those back airs, those up airs, those forward airs, when they don't really have the privilege of doing it yet. And we'll go into another game to go back into that. But because I think Sephiroth really needs to keep track of their opponent's resources, not just winning neutral. So, you know, if you're at low percent, like right now, this up air, up throw into neutral air, I have to stay grounded. My opponent, if I go for a swing, my opponent's going to hit the ground first. They're going to get under me. And all of that advantage state was for nothing. So it's really important to, you know, like you said, keep tabs on how they like to land. And because of the low percentage, things like the non-sword moves become a little bit more valuable. Like if we look into the concept of people are going to try to air dodge through Sephiroth, punish him for whiffing a button. I always tend to consider it like disrespectful, because they know that Sephiroth is going to struggle if they just brute force things, even though they're in a rough spot. So you want to play in a way that's clean enough to not get disrespected, but the difficult thing about it is you're going to get smaller rewards a lot of the time. So in situations like that, rather than using sword moves when my opponent has all their resources and they're at low percent, I love to do pivot down tilts or just down tilts in general to catch the air dodge. It's active enough, pops them back up. You can look for them to burn a resource again. You know what I mean? Kind of like the up throw in air, where you're hoping they use their air dodge preemptively, or that you're hoping they use their double jump preemptively. Because then that opens up the sword moves. So that's one of the difficult things about Sephiroth is you have to win a couple times before you can truly start using the rest of your moveset. Whereas another character might land one of those stray hits and just go into their advantage state naturally, where Sephiroth kind of has a lot of extra steps.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I've struggled with is, and I'm sure you probably caught it, I'll burn a resource like a defensive a little more often than I need to. And I feel like this is something you just learn as you play the game more and get your reps in.
It's really important, this whole disadvantage thing, especially because, like you said, a lot of players will want to get out as quickly as possible. And not only do they want to get out as quickly as possible, they also want to make up for the damage that was just lost immediately. So a lot of players will try to escape quickly, and they'll also try to get a reversal as well, which is obviously like probably the quote unquote like greedy route. A scenario you might have even heard me use that I'm always using in these MetaFi lessons is a scenario where you're getting up air stringed by Captain Falcon.
Okay.
So if Captain Falcon's up airing you, there's always the scenario afterwards where when you come out of hit stun, they're looking for the air dodge or jump, right?
Yeah.
And if they guess right, they take the stock. One of the most interesting things about this scenario is how often players think they have to burn one of those resources out of hit stun. Because think about it, if you don't give Falcon one of those visual cues, like if you drop your controller during those up airs, he essentially is going to just have to take the up airs. You're not giving him that resource to burn where he can just easily track you with a kill.
Right.
So that's one of my key perspectives of disadvantage state is, obviously valuing your resources and truly asking yourself when you have to guess out of hit stun. One of the hardest things about teaching the character for sure, but there's a couple key specifics that I think are really important. Obviously, the instant double jump back air and up air are huge because you're able to swing in a way where you're able to immediately act upon landing. Like if I do a full hop up air here, I'm in a lot of lag.
Right.
But if I do an instant double jump, I'm doing it at a full hop height without the lag.
Yeah.
So it's very, very valuable because, this is the kind of the perfect percent where you're not going to be able to neutral air someone off an up throw anymore.
Okay.
So I can go into something like this, where during that instant double jump up air, if they double jump, cool. I threatened it, I land on the ground, now I can position and track them a little bit easier because they use the key resource. And if they air dodge, that's also fine because I'm not going to be at a frame disadvantage.
Okay.
I can go straight into a jab or something if whatever it may be. But that's why that scenario is so valuable because you're able to play in a way where it's like one of the few scenarios where you can swing first, like we've been talking about. Unfortunately, you have to work extra hard to get that privilege, but it's still really important. And same thing applies to something like Shadowflare.
Yep.
If I landed Shadowflare right here, I'd be upset, right? Because as soon as that Shadowflare lands point blank, we're in a weird crappy scenario. Sephiroth is usually not going to be favored in that situation. I'm not collecting any information from landing the Shadowflare. It's just really ugly. Especially because a lot of the time the value from Shadowflare is just watching your opponent because for a few seconds they have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that tells you so much about
Are they going to run away? Are they going to push you away? All that jazz.
Tells you so much about them as a person, like their behavior throughout the rest of the match, what they're currently afraid of, what they're not afraid of. So even more than landing like a kill or a combo off of it, it's just the fact that there is something on them and they have to deal with it. So you're getting free information. You don't even have to move for those 3 seconds. You know what I mean? It's funny because you worded it in the same way I would word it, where I talk about like, hey, let's say I'm up against X player or X character and I've never played them before. Like what do I do in these scenarios so you always have a general idea for things like this, but since it's a brand new scenario, you don't want to put yourself at too much risk, right?
Right.
So something that's interesting about a move like Shadowflare is because of the low hit stun, they do have the privilege of doing something immediately after.
Okay.
It's kind of something that similar I do with a banana if I tap them with it while they're airborne as well, where it kind of resets everything. So the first thing I look for is if they press something immediately after. That can be anything, but especially if it's a swing, because that just shows, oh, maybe they were pressing that before I even Shadowflared them and they continued to press a button. So that says a lot. That says that they're in a rush and that when they get hit by something like this and they get reset like that and they whiff, that means during that whiff, I can position for something else. Like if you F-tilt as soon as I tap you there, I'm already nairing. And you're giving me a really valuable hit that I wouldn't get if you just dropped your controller.
Okay.
So that's the first thing I look for because it's very, it's pretty much the same thing as the Falcon scenario where you're giving them an opportunity to think because they're briefly out of hit stun that they're in a good spot. And a lot of players will take that opportunity to press something. So that's the first thing I look for. And the reason why it's worth looking for is even if they don't give you much to work with, you still have a few seconds to, position yourself. Or a lot of Sephiroth players come to me and ask about when they go to the ledge. And as frustrating as that is, right? They can just tank all the hits with the invincibility. it still connects into something we were talking about earlier, where now you get to watch the ledge scenario and the corner scenario play out without really doing anything, which is very valuable, obviously. It's a bit more ambiguous because, you know, when Sephiroth first came out and I would land the Shadowflare, it would be like, like, you know, it's kind of like a switch flipping where it's like, oh, time to go for a crazy moment or like a crazy kill. Like, I have so much advantage. But as the years went by, it's more so like, it's not going to be that simple. It's more about data collection. You know, and if they play so poorly around Shadowflare, you know, you can just take it and get a kill off of it or something like that. But the information is so valuable, obviously.
Nice.
And when it comes to using it, I kind of like to use it like a Joker sideB without Arsene. I've said that a million times, but basically,
what does that mean, please?
Yeah. So if I land it point blank like this, I'm not a fan because they might reverse. Like Sephiroth, it's just not a positive frame advantage. And most characters are going to have better frame data than Sephiroth, so not only am I in a position where Sephiroth doesn't like to play generally, I also might just, you know, get hit. So I like to stay on the move.
Okay.
While I'm shadowflaring. So it's kind of like a perspective. While I'd rather be mobile while using it than hit it point blank.
So
like I'd rather miss it entirely at that point.
So you, like, as a general rule, because I'm gonna try and reduce this to general rules so I'm not overwhelming and unpacking everything all the time. But you wouldn't use this while stationary ever then? I mean, unless you have like a clear punish or something.
The only time I would release it while stationary is like if I jumped and kept charging it as a mix-up. Because a lot of players will kind of play into this cadence where if they're used to you just using the non-charge, they'll start shielding or spot dodging it. And then if you can mix them up by continuing the charge. But a lot of the time I'm doing like a rising one because even a rising one can go into a double jump. Or I'm just, you know, a lot of Joker players when they have no Arsene in their side being, it goes at that like downwards diagonal angle.
Yes.
So there's a bit of that dead zone if they close the gap. So a lot of the time they're jumping backwards to consider the scenario after the fact if it doesn't work out. And with Sephiroth, it's the same logic where, you know, if they close the gap or if they jump, like this hitbox is simply just a straight line. You know, the counterplay to sideB in place is the same counterplay to doing something like this in place.
That's so, what I struggle knowing, like, when should I be tilting versus sideB? Because they feel the same range. You have the privilege
of moving. So that's why, you know, I'd rather miss it while moving than hit it point blank is always like the general thing, just to really put it into perspective for someone.
Nice.
Because there's just not as much. There's not as much value landing it point blank. And another thing with Sephiroth is just how difficult it is to always be in the position you like to be in neutral.
Understatement of the year, dude.
Yes, he wants to be at like about this range or something like that.
Yep.
But if you're swinging in place, there's so much startup that, you know, people are going to be able to close the gap. Like if I'm right here, and, you know, we're like shield to shield or something like that, and I go for this back air, if you know, dashed and shield
or something,
if you dash and shield during the startup of that back air, the situation, we're in the same spot. And when I'm teaching or when I'm trying to teach Sephiroth, that is what I want to avoid the most, and that's what I dive into the most, because this is where the art of nothing comes in. Because a lot of players, they see an opportunity. Like if I jump at you right here, a lot of Sephiroth players see that as a time to back air or up air to like anti-air.
Yeah.
But it's already too late, in my opinion, because if it doesn't work, now you're just point blank again. Or
so
you know,
pause. Sorry.
No problem.
I'm standing in the situation of the person that, like, I'm Sephiroth being attacked by someone else. Can you hover around the spot where it's too late for me so I can come back and have this as a screenshot
Once
later?
you've gotten like here,
where your double jump's coming out?
In my opinion. Like if you start the up air during this part of the jump, like the initial approach, that's fine.
Okay.
But if you are reacting to them being like at full hop height and falling on you, it's too late.
Gotcha. Okay.
In my opinion. There's characters that are super slow and floaty where something like the up air anti-airs come a bit more into play. But for a general rule, I like it because once again, like the shield scenario you just used, you want to be pre-positioning as much as possible. Because if you're not pre-positioning, then you're always going to be trying to reposition, and you're just never going to be comfortable. A lot of the time, I think it generally is because of, I think, Sephiroth being misunderstood as a character. Because at first glance, I think he seems like just a general sword character where you would just be swinging immediately, right? Like as soon as, like if I'm fighting Mario right here, like a lot of players will probably just start swinging.
Yep.
You know, kind of like how Cloud would be playing or something like that. But a lot of the time, Sephiroth has to have a little bit more insurance to afford to do that type of swing.
Okay.
So, you know, if we go to that scenario again where we're shield to shield and I do this, you dash and shield and we're in the same scenario, that's where something like Slingshot comes in. Okay. I'm repositioning and I'm not even giving them any visual cue to let them like get back into the scrap scenario. And even something like forward air, rather than a back air in that spot, is so much more valuable because you are shaving frames off. Because the back air is faster the forward air is faster than the back air. So essentially, and if we go into that jump scenario, rather than anti-airing, you know, you just go straight to slingshotting, or if you want to be offensive about it, like if you're jumping in on me, rather than doing something like this, I'll do something like that pivot down tilt. Right. Because it's checking all the boxes that we've been talking about this entire time. It's a bit faster. I don't really have the advantage to justify swinging my sword move, and I'm also repositioning with the move itself for the next scenario if it doesn't work out. And obviously if it works, I'm popping them up in the, you know, and I'm going to be, you know, trying to keep track of their resources and whatnot, and, you know, repositioning for a valuable spot to start back airing or F tilting, whatever it may be. So that essentially a lot of the time people think that, okay, now it's time to F tilt or back air. But 9 times out of 10, you usually have to wait one more step. Okay. Which is easier said than done, especially when there's pressure. You know, for example, if I'm feeling nervous, I'm definitely going to go for back air into an F tilt and just hope they get hit by something. Yeah. But, you know, think of how much extra time I've been in place and how much time they have to get into a comfortable range for them. So
bottom line I'm getting is we need to always be on the move because we have such slow startups that we need to take advantage.
Essentially, yeah. And especially because something that's interesting about Sephiroth is if we start up a game and you're playing Mario and I'm playing Sephiroth, we both know that I'm outranging you. Yeah. So a lot of the time, the value from that doesn't come from actually using those moves. It comes from the way they're preemptively playing around it. So a lot of the time, you know, when someone's trying to zone out someone with Sephiroth, they're not playing around the fact that their opponent knows that, and they're like already full hopping above them and whiff punishing the back air. You know what I mean? Right. Sephiroth's value comes from the fact that they are playing around his game plan before it's even in front of them. So you have to be so on the move because of that. You know, it's like any other win condition in Smash. Like if I'm playing Diddy Kong versus you, you're going to be playing around banana before I even throw it at you. You know what is going to happen if it hits. So for me, I'm playing around you, playing around the banana, right? Like when you jump to the platform to avoid the trip, I'm going to be right there because that's like...
Yeah, you already know where I'm going before I've made that choice. So you're able to anticipate rather than react.
With Sephiroth, it's more of just a general game plan type of thing where, you know, most characters are getting outranged by Sephiroth, so they're going to accept that fact and play around it before they even get outranged. Right. So a lot of the time, the Sephiroth players are trying to outrange them in place, and then they're constantly going to be getting the gap closed on them, and they're never going to be comfortable. So that's why it's really important to not swing at all until like a small advantage has been given to you. Connects to this scenario we've been talking about with like justifying repositioning or swinging when your opponent's approaching it. Because like those scenarios where I said it's too late to do something like a back air up tilt, that is the time to do things like shield, parry, footstool out of shield. And the difficult thing about Sephiroth's out of shield game is it's not gonna like be this magical thing where it like fixes all of his problems. It's more so like a few tools to give you to like help you survive rather than like win you games. Right. And it's one of those things where it's more about letting your opponent know you're willing to do it rather than like winning the game off of it. Like if someone's constantly bullying you and they're always like fast falling on top of you with aerials and you can't really get your timings, you can't really punish them, that's where something like footstool out of shield really comes in, because it's like, hey, I do have something for this, and you're trying to see how they change up their gameplay around that. Like if I footstool dare someone, or even if I go for a footstool dare and it doesn't even work, like let's say I dare, I miss the footstool,
right?
I'm still okay with that, unless like I'm straight up losing the game for it, obviously.
Yeah.
Because my opponent knows what that attempt was. Like when I'm playing that Fox player that was naring on top of me, they know that was like a threat. Like, hey, I do have this, or I will go for this. You have to be a little bit more respectful when you're pressing buttons.
So it's that's kind of like when you have to send the flare at least once, just so people know that you're willing to do it and not just position.
Exactly. Similar to the down smash ledge trap we got into, a little like the mix-up we got into, where it's like, hey, like I will attack this at the source to make you play differently.
So real quick, to go back to that ledge thing, down smash is a commitment. Is by default we should be doing our F tilt, just angling it for when they get up, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I knew that.
Down smash is really interesting because it's one of those things where the value of it really depends on your opponent's perception of the move. As the Sephiroth player, for me, I actually don't think down smash is very good at all.
Okay.
I think up smash is the best smash tech overall, like in just in general, and then obviously forward smash is like just straight up not good.
Yeah, dog water.
Down smash is okay, but it doesn't do nearly as much shield damage as you would want in a lot of the scenarios.
You have to land a hit first, right, for the actual
it's usually not breaking the shield straight up. But obviously, the win condition of a shield break is very valuable for any character, especially because Sephiroth has the neutral be F smash. So a lot of players will be really preemptive and afraid of it, and that's where the value of it shoots up, because they might be more afraid of it than they should be, because they might think it does more shield damage or something like that. And that's where you can afford to do like really preemptive sword swings, just because they're probably going to be very airborne. They might not be shielding as much, which also means they probably won't be parrying as much. So the inherent threat of down smash becomes really valuable if you can tell they're afraid of it. But, obviously in reality, it's not nearly as scary as they think it is, because it's not just going to pop their shield out of nowhere.
Okay.
So it really depends on your opponent, whereas up smash has some of the inherent values of down smash without some of the flaws.
Can you like two-frame with it? Like, how are you using up smash ledge guard? I'm at ledge right now.
Also like a ledge trap, whereas the preemptive back hit of it you can use at the same timing as you would use against someone rushing off the ledge with down smash.
Okay.
And you would get that sweet spot with the back hit. Like a lot of players might like jump. And if you time it as they get up, especially with wing, if they neutral get up into shield, they're not going to punish it.
Interesting.
If you're timing it as they get up or something like that.
Okay.
And you can apply the same logic of using the platform as a roof.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm throwing you above and I'm playing against like a slow floaty character, like that can be a checkmate sometimes, especially with wing. So overall, I think up smash has more general use. It also does technically have some of the value that down smash is supposed to be unique to itself.
Okay. So some questions for you.
No problem.
What's the first thing you try to learn from a new opponent? From the perspective of Sephiroth, like, because you're all about learning their mood, gathering that information, and capitalizing on it later, where a lot of people more so just autopilot until they get in a scenario they know, and then they kind of go from there. Like, what are you doing? Like, you never met Mars before. Here's a Zero Suit Samus. Like, what the fuck do you do? Kind of thing. Like, I guess, like, I don't know. I'm starting to go to the local. I don't know these people. They're half my age. I don't care to know them, but I do want to play Smash.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, absolutely. My entire, like, because I've been doing this for like 10 years, so my entire like life has been dedicated to speeding up that process of learning my opponent.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You're only going to have like
you get 3 rounds at best sometimes.
Yeah, you're only gonna have a few games to work with, so I can't start from scratch every single time.
Right.
It's just not going to be consistent. Even if Sephiroth was the best character in the game, I wouldn't want it to be that way. So, you know, it starts before you're even playing for me. Like, it's kind of like an obsession for me. Like I'm always reading sports psychology books. Whenever I'm at a tournament, I'm always paying attention to people's body language and how they talk, and I'm trying to connect that into their behavior in Smash. Nice. So as soon as I'm striking stages with my opponent, like, I'm already like paying attention to them, and I might try to make a read on how they'll perform in the game based on the way they're talking, or their body language, or the stages they strike. And if I know the character they play, the process is already starting there. And I guess first, to answer your question about like what to do against someone you've never played before, like what am I looking for?
Yes.
As Sephiroth, it would probably be whatever I can do to convince them that locking into shield is the play.
Right.
Whether it's like visual cues or just general movement, because once I lock them into shield and I can justify like, oh, they have a weaker shield than me, that's the first small advantage for me to start actually using Sephiroth's sword moves, because they have a more likely success rate if their shield isn't healthy, because they might run into it, they might jump into it, they might get shield poked, etc. So that's the first thing I'll look to. That's why something like this, you even mentioned like releasing the flare once in a while, which is interesting, because something like this I actually value a lot. But if I'm explaining this to someone that doesn't really play Smash, it's like, what's the value of this, right?
Oh, that's huge. This is the greatest thing ever. Well, not ever, but it's fucking up there.
You get so much value from your opponent responding to it or not responding to it. Like, if my opponent doesn't respond to it at all, it's like, okay, that's good to know. They're not afraid of it. I'm not going to force anything. But if I do this and my opponent jumps to that platform, that's such good information. They might jump off ledge, they might jump out of disadvantage, they might do this and that, and like the ball's already rolling, and I haven't even thrown the projectile at them.
Nice.
The hardest thing about it is obviously the projectile itself is terrible, so it's hard to scare them with that type of thing, but it's still really good. It's very similar to like moving around while shadow flaring and stuff like that, where you're just doing whatever you can, you're giving them a couple visual cues and seeing how they respond. And like, once my opponent has slowed down and starts locking themselves into shield in any match with any character, for me, that's kind of like a win, in the sense of it's kind of like they've accepted that they're getting like outmaneuvered in neutral, and they're locking them, they're like kind of turtling a little bit. And that's where you can really start to dance on them, especially with a character like Sephiroth, whose fast fall is so good. Where you can really start bullying them with grabs, or you can start fast fall back airing their shield, and you really start slowing them down. And now you're in a situation where you get to position all you want, and they're not, brute forcing it, and you're running away from them. So if you can somehow convince them that Sephiroth is like kind of outmaneuvering them, it's very, very helpful. And obviously it's not easy, but there's a lot of things you can learn to, I think, help like, out creative your opponent or confuse them a little bit, because we even haven't even really talked about like blade dash or anything like that.
Blade dash is fucking spicy. I feel like there's so much there that I'm just
exactly. It's probably the most underutilized general move at any level of play from Sephiroth. I feel like even the best Sephiroth players in the world like just aren't really using it.
What are you doing, man? You're slacking, Gavin.
I feel like even it kind of connects to that down tilt we were talking about earlier, where it's kind of like a nice way to threaten that type of landing without committing to one of your slow moves. With blade dash, it's the same thing. A lot of players are really a big fan, including myself, of doing it out of the corner, because you play patiently in the corner, you're waiting a little bit, you see some visual cue, and you go right through them. It's kind of like, a character like Fox probably would like to be able to do that, but their side B doesn't go through shield, whereas Sephiroth does. Whereas Sephiroth does, and he gets like all the different angles from above as well. Like, if you're center stage right here and I do this, not only am I crossing you up, I'm also tapping your shield a little bit, and I'm repositioning for the next scenario. It's another one of those moves where it checks every box at once, while also being a bit creative and can throw your opponent off. So I'm a huge fan of it.
Do you treat it like a string or a combo? Like, because there's some angles, man, hitting it with a fucking box is brutal, but there's some angles where it props him up. Like, I think I was floating around here. Could you have done a jump back there, or is that not something to be?
It will never ever be true.
Okay.
Like, there will never be any true combo off of Blade Dash, unfortunately. But what I will compare it to is that scenario I talked about where you're looking to see if they do anything greedy after tapping them with Shadowflare. It's very similar.
Oh yeah, like they're gonna mash nair or something.
As soon as you pop them up, you look for a resource or a swing.
Okay.
And if they don't give it to you, that's fine. You can just play patiently and take the positioning. But if they do something like a buffered jump or a buffered air dodge, that's where something like instant double jump aerial comes in, or that's something where like dash attacking the landing comes in, or something like that, right?
Okay.
It's one of those scenarios where you're really testing their knowledge of the frame advantage, because, you know, like you asked, like, is there a combo here? Your opponent's definitely not going to know if there's a combo there because they're not playing Sephiroth.
Right.
So, once you hit them with that blade dash is essentially the question of like, hey, do you know?
Yeah.
Do you know the scenario you're in or not? And if they don't, and they burn a resource that they didn't have to burn, then you can take advantage of it for sure. Because if you double jump and I hit you off stage, a lot of characters get checkmated by like the counter on their edge guard or something like that. So it's one of those scenarios where that's just how Sephiroth is going to win in general, where he's going to choke out as many resources as he can and try to checkmate you a little bit.
Gotcha.
Just because from the range he has or something like that. That's why I really value moves like Suicide Up B to close out games. Because as risky and difficult as it can be, in a lot of situations, technically it's checkmate.
Oh, okay. I guess you can follow people with it, which is nice.
Like if it's last stock and they burned all their resources and they're drifting to recover, they only have one route to recover. Like technically that's checkmate, because like no one's going to avoid this.
Yeah, fair. So one thing that I gotta know, because it's bothered me so much. I play with the Game & Watch, it's pretty good. Bucket seems to invalidate all of side B, and side B is where we get a lot of information. So what I have started to do is if I just flash flare, not side B but flare, it at least like prompts a bucket, and then I can try and work with that. Or I'll throw a side B away from them to try and bait out a bucket. But like aside from that, I've kind of just been like, okay, this is garbage. I just can't press B anymore. Am I approaching that correctly, or is that mistaken?
Getting creative with it is really important. Rather than like getting rid of the option altogether, getting creative with it is really important, because with Game & Watch Bucket specifically, when he releases it, it is one of his laggier options. Like if he doesn't actually absorb anything and he has to let go of the bucket.
Okay.
You know, with Diddy Kong, I'm kind of dealing with a similar thing, because he reflects the banana toss. So a lot of the time I'm trying to get him to commit to the bucket at like a poor range, so I can actually like, you know, like monkey flip him or something like that.
Right.
With Sephiroth, it's a little similar. It's more difficult to get him to do something really punishable with it, just because Sephiroth isn't like throwing a projectile or anything. But what's nice about it is you can't afford to let him bucket a side B or two and let him know that you're not afraid to do it, because as long as you don't give him the third bucket, it's okay. So throughout the game, I think you can pace yourself.
Okay.
Because imagine something like this. Like, if I'm against if I'm against Game & Watch, and I land a side B in a scenario like that while he's airborne,
yeah.
As soon as Game & Watch gets out of hitstun, he's probably gonna up B or down air or something. So if I can reset his air mobility and like tap him with something and really test his discipline, imagine the reward from landing a counter on his down air. He'll just explode. So without side B, you don't really have a way to do that like small little tap and like threat. So it's worth the shot. It's really difficult because you only have like 2 or 3 chances.
Yeah, it's a tight window.
So, but it is interesting in the fact of getting him to use bucket preemptively. Whereas if you just disregard your neutral B and side B altogether, he's never gonna have to bucket, and he's just gonna play like Game & Watch, and you're gonna have a hard time. But the threat of your projectile and the threat of bucket will slow things down, and it's gonna be a lot comfortable for Sephiroth, I think. instead of just running into you and going crazy, occasionally going for a bucket, I think, is worth the sacrifice. You know what I mean?
Right.
Especially because he might be a little more grounded. He's going to be a little slower. It's gonna complement reverse up air, and things like that. But yeah, surprisingly, despite it being like Game & Watch being slower and getting outranged by Sephiroth, it can be very, very difficult, especially because his crouch is so valuable versus most of Sephiroth's moves.
Yep.
So it is a very complicated matchup. Sadly, you can't just outrange him. But there's a lot of interesting things. Like Sephiroth's up air is very good versus a landing Game & Watch because you can kind of. I feel like you're one of the few characters that can disrespect down air. Like you can attack it without putting yourself at risk.
Yeah.
A lot of characters don't have the range or mobility to like position around it. They usually have to like respect it before Game & Watch even lands. So it's interesting, but yeah, I think you're on the right track with dealing with bucket because you're not getting rid of your special moves altogether.
Right.
Because like we've been saying, like it's not like he absorbs one Shadowflare and it's game over. Like if he absorbs 2 or 3, it's fine, and at least the bucket itself when it releases isn't going to be strong.
So the bottom line, to like accumulate what we've covered today, movement is everything because like a stationary Seph is really cool. It makes up for our committal everythings as well.
Yeah.
We kind of have to burn our sword, if I'm not mistaken. I guess that means be comfortable with Nair, obviously, but not jab as well, right? I don't know.
Be comfortable, parry, jab, parry, down tilt, parry, up tilt,
right.
being comfortable with neutral air, being comfortable with slingshot.
Okay.
It's kind of like the perspective of, if I do this back air towards you, it's very valuable for the situation after if it hits, because I'm just pushing my advantage and I'm closer to you. But this slingshot forward air is super valuable because it's faster and I'm repositioning for the next scenario.
Okay.
It's all about that. And for the sword moves, it's kind of like my general rule of thumb is I need some sort of insurance or advantage to justify using them in like a swing first kind of perspective.
So you usually wait for some resource to be spent before you commit to anything, is that correct?
Yeah, even if it's really small, like their shield isn't as healthy as mine, like it's not necessarily like they've spent anything, but it makes it easier for me to justify the button press.
How are you playing from behind? Because this game's very stubborn now in the later meta.
Yeah,
like someone is just totally okay to be like, I'll fucking just watch whatever's on my second monitor and never approach. I have a B button right here. It's silly.
I think that's a great point. And for things like that, it comes down to not even like a Sephiroth thing. It kind of comes down to pacing a game of Smash in general. Because the clock is one of the most important resources for anyone. It's one of the things especially when I first started doing Metafy lessons, I would try to.
By the way, you have 7 minutes, go! I don't know why people don't register the UI in this game.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of the time people don't look at it or anything, but the clock is kind of everything for me to help dictate my pacing. Because first, it comes down to teaching the idea of playing from a deficit and playing with a lead. And I'm always trying to teach the perspective of that it's just two sides of the same coin.
Yep.
And a lot of the skills that come with one come with the other. And I have a lot of experience with Wario over the years. I've played him in like a bunch of different Smash games, and like obviously the clock is a resource for him with like Waft. But I'm always trying to teach that like it can be used for anyone. The situation I'm always using is if I lose the first stock and there's 5.5 minutes left, I'm not going to play like I'm at a deficit. There's so much time that I'm just going to play like it's even.
Okay.
But if I lose the stock and there's 2 minutes left, now I have to weave commitments. I have to start weaving commitments into my gameplay because I can't afford to treat the game like I'm winning or it's even.
Yeah. And the amount of coming back from like a 1 to 3 and then still getting the win with this character, it's made me realize that like the game isn't over until it's over.
Exactly, and essentially you want to use the clock as a way to test your opponent to do these things in the first place, because I think a lot of people play this game very black and white in the sense of if I'm at an advantage, I don't have to approach, and if I'm at a deficit, I have to approach, and they don't use the clock as a way to like kind of pace that, because it's not like they're wrong, but they're treating it way too simple in the sense of like, that's why like when I'm playing, when I'm in the corner, I'll corner myself for so long just to see if my opponent truly knows the advantage they have. Because you'd be surprised how many great players will just approach the corner, try to grab you, dash attack into you, and you're just going to land the most valuable hit ever because it's in the corner or something like that.
Yeah, back air or back air.
So
it's just a good one there. Can we play a round, or do you just like rip apart what my habits are? Or if we have time for two, I would appreciate that as well.
Yeah, fine. It's kind of the same thing as basically what I'm saying is you want to test your opponent's ability to hold a lead. You don't want to just start running into them because you're at a deficit. You want to see if they're even comfortable with a lead, because holding a lead is just as difficult as bringing a game back from a deficit in terms of the pacing that goes into it. So I'm always willing, even if I'm losing, I'm always willing to test my opponent to see if they really have the discipline to hold that lead.
Make them work for every hit, right?
Exactly, yeah.
You are the only person I know who plays this character, and you happen to be you. So, so I haven't studied the art of banana yet, unfortunately.
See, that was a scenario where I hit you, and like we briefly were next to each other out of hitstun, and that air dodge is something I'm looking for, right? Like as soon as you burn your air dodge,
oh, okay.
That's a situation where, like, because it was like a reset type of scenario, I'm immediately trying to get a big hit that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to get.
Gotcha. You're testing to see if I go for the Poor Glory special. Roll back air. Nice one. It's very hard to take back tempo, I find, in these scenarios.
Yeah, it's definitely another situation of constantly testing my opponent's like knowledge if I'm like vulnerable or not, you know what I mean? Like kind of going in and out of someone's range over and over and trying to get them to, I guess, do the hard work for me.
I got a couple sessions with a guy, Hags King DK. I'm not sure if he probably may have found him in pools at some point. But he mentions how when you land a hit, you take up space through like pressure and stuff, and if not, you kind of just keep giving them something to think about until you get close. Why would I even try that? Oh my god, I'm an animal. But I mean, that would work on a Donkey Kong. I don't think that applies to Sephiroth. No freaking way. Okay.
You know, like this pop gun thing where I jump in pop gun beer burst is the same thing as the Shadowflare, where it's like I jump for a brief moment, give a visual cue, and then reposition just to see like how they respond to it, if at all.
So that get up attack, you noted, and you're like, he was looking for that there, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. I position myself a little bit, maybe give a visual cue or two. Okay. Value if getting the hit is even worth it, etc.
Gotcha. That's just box fingers there. Okay. So give a visual, observe if they like take the bait, and then next time you're in that scenario, because it's gonna repeat itself. That's just the nature of this game. You'll be able to act on it.
Yeah, it's a big combination of standing your ground, actually threatening the ledge in the corner, while also prioritizing the stage control you have. Like for example, if we look into something like two framing in Ultimate, if you go for your two frame option, you want to do it in a way where you'd rather be early with it than late, because if you're too late with the two frame, you're committing to, if it works, great, and if it doesn't, my advantage state is over.
Right.
So it's kind of similar to what we've been talking about with Sephiroth's like tilt and Downsmash and everything like that, where you want to time things in a way where if they work, cool, and if they don't, you can still be positioned to hold your advantage. Like if I go for this Diddy F tilt, I would much rather be way too early than way too late because I can still, take advantage of Diddy's ledge trapping or something. So
okay, so Sephiroth is new to this game. How the hell did you start learning? Like he's a new character. This game is overwhelming. If you're to someone who hasn't played for 10 years, I mean, I did growing up, but not like you.
yeah.
Where do you start? Like, do you like, okay, for this session, I'm going to focus on getting landing there, forward air, or something silly like that? Or do you have, like, how do you approach learning in this game?
That's actually a good question. I've never been asked like how I learned him from day one.
Doesn't even have to be Sephiroth, like anything. What's your approach? How's your mind work?
I've always felt pretty quick to learn a character, whether it's like a new character or just a character I don't have as much experience with. I feel like I'm usually pretty quick. It's probably just a lot of these general rules that we've even been talking about in this lesson that can apply to any character, and you can kind of branch out from there with their character specifics.
Right.
Like with Sephiroth, it's like, when you go to training mode with a new character, I feel like a lot of people that have been playing for a long time would say the same thing as me, where like the first thing you do is you probably grab them and do all your throws or something. It's like, okay, is this throw purely for positioning? Does this throw combo? Does this throw do this with this DI? Does this throw kill? And like it starts branching out from there. Like with Sephiroth up throw, it's like, okay, I get a nair, but if I get a wing, I get another jump and another hit, and it just starts slowly branching out from there.
Is it always combos that you're practicing though? Like this guy is mostly strings and intuition. Like he's plays to a lot of game sense. It's not a valuable thing, but something like a grab is so universal, right? Like if I'm playing on a lead smash, and I'm playing a character, like if I'm playing Kirby, who's just a character I don't play at all, but I can just kind of let my opponent lose to themselves because I'll just like shield grab them for messing up over and over. And like I could do that regardless of what character I'm playing. Yeah, that's just funnies. Yes.
Yeah. Grab is such a big starting point, and managing your shield health is such a good starting point as well.
Okay.
That like I think it's a natural thing with a new character, and then from there it gets very, even if there's a small comparison, you can make a comparison with like every single move to another character's move. Like with Sephiroth F tilt, it's like, okay, this obviously is a move that's like dictating space, and it's also a move where if my opponent does something punishable, and I'm like not really sure the exact numbers, like it's gonna be the move I throw out. Like, if I think of a character like Roy or something like that, it's the same thing where like they're a little farther away, but you can hit them. Like it's kind of just the go-to.
Okay.
And jab is always something you go for when like it's a really scrappy scenario and you can throw out like a quick move, and jab is always going to be your quickest move 9 times out of 10. So it kind of just it all starts branching out from there, and I think when you first start, you kind of let your opponent beat themselves, and then the more you get comfortable with your character, the more you can really, really punish them for beating themselves.
Gotcha.
And then like Shadowflare was the one I probably was into the most, just because of the potential